A warm welcome also from my side and of course also from Miebach Consulting. We are a logistics consulting company, and today I want to talk with you about the topic of integrating sustainability in the topic of network design. I want to start with a short introduction of the sustainability understanding of our customers in the market. Then I will introduce you really to my daily business, what is network design, what I'm actually doing, and then we will dig a bit deeper into the topic, how we can integrate sustainability into these strategical decisions, and finish up with a short outlook on the topic of future developments. I want to start the presentation with two market studies which Miebach Consulting has conducted in the past. In 2020, we surveyed our customer base and companies about their sustainability initiatives along their supply chain. And to put the results into a nutshell, it was sustainability is great, as it does not come with a lot of costs. So the feedback was that the sustainability improvements through initiatives were mainly byproducts out of initiatives towards cost reduction. And if there were pure greening initiatives, they were usually correlated with low implementation costs. Through this survey, we also learned that the companies were hindered somehow in some of their initiatives through the price sensitivity of the customers. So there was this gap of possible greening initiatives and then really performed ones. So one of the conclusions out of this survey was that this gap somehow needs to be closed, and this is then the task of governments and legislation. And this year, only 2 years later, we run another market study about what we just learned in the last presentation about the upcoming Supply Chain Due Diligence Act of 2023 of the EU. So we asked the companies, what is the impact along your supply chains? Are you affected by these regulatory changes? And the feedback was really interesting, because I think it was about 81% responded back, yeah, we are heavily impacted and we have to adapt our supply chains. So we learned through this market study that now the companies saw sustainability as one of their success factors and really a prerequisite for their business. And it is really interesting to see this change, because the two market studies were only 2 years apart. And that is exactly what we're experiencing in our daily business as consultants. So sustainability has arrived in our daily business. In almost all of the network studies which I'm conducting now, sustainability is a topic, we have to consider it, and this was not the case 2 years ago. 2 years ago, this was completely irrelevant for the network studies. We also received the first request for really pure greening projects, where we then, for example, looking at transportation network to make this more sustainable. What are the impacts to bring more cargo on the rail, and so on. And these were some of the reasons why we as Miebach decided to build up this internal center of excellence for sustainability, to gather this expertise and to be able to help our clients to answer also these questions. One limitation which I want to make already at the beginning of this presentation is the understanding of our customers of sustainability. Because when we're talking about sustainability, this is really the 3 Ps. So we have people, planet, and prosperity. But most of the times, we're really only focusing on environmental sustainability, only one of the 3 pillars. And in network design, we're talking about really strategic decisions. And here our clients require a comparable, a quantitative KPI. So the focus, also environmental sustainability, lies on greenhouse gases. So usually we work with a KPI of CO2 equivalent emissions. We are aware that there are different aspects, air pollution and waste, but currently this is the limitation from our customer side. So let's talk about network design. Let's talk about what I'm doing actually all day long. So the target in network design for us as logisticians is to really identify the optimal setup of a specific network for our clients, integrating given service requirements, and also, of course, with a target to minimize costs. And these decisions are long-term. So we're consulting our clients, how should your network look in 5 years, in 8 years, in 10 years? Where should it develop to? Because this is nothing which you can change overnight, where your distribution centers are, how many do you have? And the network design, we usually look at two elements. So it's on the one hand, it's warehousing, and on the other hand, it's transportation. And in warehousing, the target is to identify the optimal footprint, meaning what is the number of DCs required, what is the locations, what is the size of these DCs, and what is the function. On the right side of the screen, you can see the same customer base in Central Europe served by 1 up to 6 distribution centers. And of course, this has a huge impact on delivery times, because you're much closer to your customer with more DCs, but also on costs. So more DCs usually means more warehousing costs. And then the second part, which we look into in network design, is transportation. Of course, this is usually correlated with the first question of the warehouses, because when you are closer to your customers, this has an impact on transportation. But what we also do in network design is the flow optimization. Meaning, we're not only telling the clients where the DCs should be, we're also telling which customers should be served from the DCs, and which products do we actually should store there. So it's a cost and service optimal allocation, so that the clients can be served from the right DC with the right products. And again, just bear in mind that these decisions are really strategical. So this is not a tactile operational decision, because this is how your network is supposed to develop within 5, 8, or 10 years. And how do we then actually help the customer to find a decision, how the network should look like? We always starting with analyzing the as-is network. How does your network look like? What are your transportation costs? What's the impact on service levels? And then we build up together with the client scenarios which are promising. And thereby we can play around, as you just have seen on the previous slide, the number of DCs. So is it 1, 2, 4? I don't know. We can play around with brownfield situations, so existing industry sites. We can play around with greenfields, so completely new sites, with the tiers of the network. Do you have a CDC, RDC structure, or are all the warehouses on the same level? So in the end, we have a set of scenarios. Usually we build a shortlist for the scenarios which are really promising. And then we build this into our simulation tools, and we run it. And some of the results, of course, are then the cost impact. What is the warehousing cost? What is the transportation cost? So we have a KPI here. We can compare the different scenarios. And the same we can do for service, because we know the distance to the customer. We know the transportation time. So in the end, we can also do for all the different scenarios which we run, we have information. How long does it take to reach 80%, 90%, 95% of your customer? So again, we have this comparable KPI. And this is then where the decision is based on the different KPIs. And this is how network design looked 2 years ago. But nowadays, the client's also requesting sustainability as an important part in this decision-making process. So the question is, how do we actually bring sustainability into this topic? How do we know what is this, the sustainable impact? What is the emission impact of the different scenarios? Because the challenge which you are facing here is you can report emissions from your previous year. You look at your fuel consumption and so on, and this you can convert into emissions. But the challenge which we are facing is we're talking now about networks in the future. We're talking now about networks where we don't have any information on the transportation lanes and on the DCs. We're talking about DCs which are not existent. So this is the challenge which we are facing. Of course, other parts is always data quality and availability, network complexity. But the main question is really, how do we estimate emissions for a possible future network? And we approach this in two steps. So transportation and warehousing is separated here. For transportation, some of the results of the simulation tools is that we know the ton kilometers of each transportation lane. And then the second step is that we are looking at the transportation lanes and we specify them together with our client. So this starts, of course, with the mode of transport. But we can go much more deeper. Vehicle type, is it a 7.5 or 22-ton truck? Utilization, fuel type. Do you use electrified vans? Do you use alternative fuels? All of that can be covered. And if this information is not available, we also have industry standards available to estimate the emissions here. So the result is then we know for each transportation lane an approximation of the emissions generated through this transportation. And aggregated, we now can compare each of the scenarios. What are the emissions through transportation in all of these scenarios? And then basically we do the same for warehousing. For warehousing, the challenges remain equal. We were talking now about DCs which haven't been built up yet. So we need an approach to estimate the emissions from a high-level perspective. And we do that by sizing the operations. So if we're talking about a scenario where we expand an existing site, where we move an existing site from one place to another, usually we have information available, so like electricity consumption. And then with country-specific emission rates, we can transform the emissions. We can calculate the emissions. And if we then have the case where we don't have any information available of the possible warehouse, we use a throughput approach. So we have average emission factors available based on throughput, and here we can differentiate between what is the type of the DC. Is it focusing on transshipment? Is it focusing on warehousing? How does the storage temperature look like? We know that through the type of the products of the customer. Is it ambient? Is it chilled? Is it mixed? All of these factors can be included, and through that we are generating high-level emissions also for each of the scenarios for warehousing. Putting that together, now when you think back to the triangle, we not only have the KPI for costs and service levels, but we also have the KPI now available for sustainability. And this is then where we can help our client to understand the different impacts and help our client to make the right decision for their future setup. Of course, this is always a trade-off. There's not this one right solution. It depends on the prioritization of the client. What is the focus? Because there's not this one right decision. But we do this sustainability analysis not only to find one network setup which is the right one for the client, it also helps us and the client to understand the emission impact of the different network setups, meaning we can learn also from the different scenarios. For example, we have one scenario which is even better from the emission perspective than the favorite one from the client, but it's more expensive. Then we can look into it and see, okay, what are the drivers for the better emission footprint? To learn for the client what they should change in their operations, or to build up a new scenario to include these changes. So this can also be an iterative process. In general, network design, what we are doing is driving sustainability of our clients. Why is that? I was talking before when I said transportation is the second part of network design. We always do a flow optimization. And in this case, we are driving sustainability also for our clients. Because what we're doing is we're compiling a lot of data together and creating a lot of visibility for our clients. And this is often the first time that they have this, because often they use different systems in different countries and so on. So we put everything into one place and then create visibility. And it's really interesting to see what we're always finding. So often it's underutilization or really absurd transportation flows, which the clients are not aware of. So just recently, I had a project where the customer produced a good in the US, and then this was shipped via plane, so really sustainable, to Germany, stored in a DC, and then the end customer receiving these products were only in Canada and Mexico. But yeah, this is just one of the examples which we are finding and where we can also help our clients to drive sustainability. One last point which I want to mention on this slide is also the topic about service and the correlation to emissions. Because nowadays we're living in a world of Amazonization, service insanity. Everybody needs everything very quick. And our clients sometimes forget that this also has an impact on sustainability. Because with higher service, you're losing consolidation effects, meaning you have more and smaller shipments. And this has an impact not only on costs, but also on emissions. So one of the recommendations is for our clients always to differentiate their customer, differentiate the service for the customers by clustering them. I mean, this is nothing new, but sometimes they really need to be aware of this impact on sustainability as well. And more interesting from my perspective in projects is when our clients let their customer cluster themselves. Meaning, for example, they are usually, the customer of our client usually receives 3 shipments per week. And now our client offers, we do 1 shipment per week, but with a price reduction. And it is always surprising how many businesses in the end are still more price sensitive and agree to these reductions. This is the way how we do network studies, how we integrate sustainability into our network studies nowadays. This is our daily business, but of course this is an ongoing process. So a possible next step, what I think of what we can do, is really to run these network studies purely focusing on CO2 equivalent emissions. Not to find the right solution, but to find the CO2 optimal solution. And then again, look at what are the implications, what do I have to change in the network, what are the relations to cost and service to improve the existing network or to build the right network in the future. And how I said, this is not a finished process. This is not fixed because in network design, there are many aspects which could be included into the topic of sustainability. So right in the beginning, I said already that nowadays we're only looking at one pillar of sustainability. So there are the other 2. And even environmental sustainability, we're focusing only on greenhouse gases. So what is about the topic of waste? Especially when you think about atomic energy. So from a CO2 perspective, this is really green. But yeah, there is also the topic of atomic waste, other aspects, air pollution, and so on. So there are still many questions remaining. Furthermore, currently we're really focusing on the operational side. So what are the emissions which are caused through the production, through warehousing, through transportation. But when we, as Miebach, recommending to build a new site somewhere else, the question also should be asked, what is happening with the current warehouse? Is it rented to some other company? Or is it remaining empty? Because then you should also think about the emissions to build actually the new warehouse. And you can play that even further. What about the emissions to transport the goods to build the new warehouse? What about the emissions to build the trucks to transport the goods to the new warehouse? And so on. So system boundaries are not fixed. We have to discuss these aspects. And that is one of the reasons why I'm really happy that we have the Center of Excellence within Miebach, where we have these 4 different work streams which are collaborating together to answer these questions about sustainability and how to integrate it into our daily business. And also to have this holistic approach jointly in this through the Center of Excellence of sustainability. When I'm talking about this holistic approach, this is how Miebach is trying to drive sustainability along the supply chain. So we have these different work streams. We try to integrate it in every single step along our supply chain consultancy service. And most importantly, it's not stopping with network design. Of course, we're not really able to include these aspects of operations, how to set up your processes, about sites where we really can go into detail, how to build up your warehouse, about solar panels, lighting, and so on. This can't be included into a really strategical decision-making process. But we have that on the radar, and at a later stage along the supply chain, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise to consult our clients along this journey. But nevertheless, I'm really happy that I was able to introduce you today to the topic of network design and how we integrate sustainability into that. And I'm looking forward to your questions now or in the upcoming lunch break. Thank you very much for your attention.
Jakob, thank you very much. Never ever introduce a lunch break because then everybody is leaving. I do have a couple of questions for you left because maybe you can tell us a bit more about how the implementation of sustainability did indeed impact customers' decision making in their projects. Tell us a bit more about that.
Of course. A nice question, because when I'm presenting this topic, of course, now it sounds like all the clients want sustainability as their main target. However, this is sadly not the case yet. So, how I said in the presentation 2 years ago, the decision-making on network design was purely driven by cost and service levels. And nowadays, we have the third pillar of sustainability included. In the projects, in the end, cost is still the main driver, but it is changing. Sustainability is becoming more attention. So, like 1.5 years ago, sustainability came up, but there was more topic about marketing. So in the end, a decision was made for one of the network setups, and then it was used, okay, when we do this network setup, we're also saving X amount of CO2 tons. So there was really just a marketing argument. But now companies starting to really take it as a third decision criteria, not as important as costs yet, but it is an ongoing process. So I am hoping that it will even get more important and get more attention.
So in your opinion, what role does network design play in the supply chain's overall sustainability strategy?
So when you think back about the last slide, we as Miebach trying to drive sustainability holistically. So not only in network design, but also in the other steps along the supply chain. And for me, in network design, this is really one of the core first steps. So this will help you to set up your network to be more sustainable, but it's only one of the first steps. It is a really important step because there you really have this top-down view, and then it enables the next step even better to drive sustainability there.